Yes.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Lovecraft Easing podcast. I'm Mike Davis. And if
Davis
if you're
and
new, if
Davis
if you're
and
new, who's got their volume up? Matt Carpenter.
What, me?
If you've never seen one of these before, uh, we do this every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern here on this YouTube channel, and you can watch live or later, or you can wait a few days for the audio only edition to come out on Apple and Spotify and all those other places if you want to listen in your car or whatnot. So that's kind of the format for those who are new. And we're going to be talking about, well, actually, I should let Patrick, the editor, briefly say what we're going to be talking about. Then we'll introduce everyone, and then we'll get right back to it. So, all right,
All
Patrick,
right. Yeah,
Patrick,
sure.
go for it.
Patrick Barb. I am usually a writer of weird, dark, and spooky stories, but in this case, I put on my editor and publisher hat to produce the anthology. And One Day We Will Die: Strange Stories Inspired by the Music of Neutral Milk Hotel. And that's basically the subtitle. Kind of gives away the game of what it's all about there.
And the first time I heard about a band called, hi, Aaron, greetings. The first time I heard about a band called Neutral Milk Hotel was when Patrick emailed me and said, "Can we talk about this?" Because I've got an anthology uh, inspired by this. So, of course, I did a little reading since then, but this is going to be an education for me too. So, this should be a lot of fun.
I
Uh,
heard that from a lot of people, to be fair. Like, they're like, "Oh, I don't know them," but, you
yeah,
know,
seems like a cult following
sure,
type thing.
definitely.
Yeah. So I'll have my panelists introduce themselves first. Actually, John is a panelist and a guest today. So let's start with John Langan.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Langan. I have a couple of novels, a bunch of short story collections out, and yeah, I have a story in this anthology. I'm very pleased to be able to say that.
And Matt, you've got a prize today, right?
Yes, there is a prize today. It's a very nice one. It's a paperback copy of the delightful H.P. Lovecraft cat book from Necronomicon Press. It's illustrated by Jason Eckhart. It's all of his writings about cats in stories, poetry, and letters. If you want a chance to win it, send an email to easyandprizes@gmail.com and put cat in the subject line. We usually draw a winner in about 8 weeks, and if you enter, it could be you.
Yeah, and speaking of prizes, Kim Smeltzer won the prize last week. We were talking to the creator, one of the creators of a new horror video game, and they gave me a free code to give away. So yeah. Pete, if you're not still
Pete
eating,
Wallach,
that is.
writer. Um, I've got a couple novels out, a couple short story collections. I'm like the evil version of John Langan.
No,
Yes, I
the
am.
more evil version.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know how to feel about that. I feel that makes you good then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Exactly.
I don't understand math.
I don't
S-
understand that either.
so anyway, you see how it goes, right, guys? Uh, let's go to Brian Evanson next. And guys, please do mention whatever recent book you've published or whatever you're about to do so that the audience can look it up and buy the book. So, hey, Brian.
Okay. I'm Brian Evanson. I have a story in this anthology as well. My most recent book is a book called Good Night, Sleep Tight, which is a book of stories.
I uh, Brian was on a couple of months ago on this podcast, and it was a really wonderful conversation. So
Yeah, I had a good time. I'm glad you did too. Yeah.
I did. Thank you. And for those who are new, look that up too, if you like listening to Brian, and who doesn't. So um, let's see who's got their. Aaron, you want to introduce yourself?
Okay. My name is Erin Brown. I am a speculative fiction author, mostly horror, but some science fiction fantasy. And I've just got a ton of short stories out everywhere, mostly. And one book novelette coming out in the summer through Psychopalm called Garden of the Blood Potter. So that's coming out, I think, in July or August of 2025.
Garden of the Blood Potter.
Garden of the Blood Potter, yes.
Okay. Is there a pre-order link for this yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. We're still in editing mode, but all the information about everything that I've published, including things that are free to read, are on my website with links at ebrownwrites.com.
Oh, that's helpful. Great.
Yeah.
And please, if you want to, feel free to, when you do have a pre-order link or when the book comes out, to email me, and I'll be happy to post something about it. So, oh,
Thank you.
dear God, Cisco's watching. So watch yourself, John.
He's right behind me. He just stepped out of an angle.
Dave, how about you next?
Sure. Hey, I'm Dave Urban, aka D. Matthew Urban. I have a story in this anthology and a few other places, and I have a collection coming out next month from Cursed Morsels Press called Shaky Pictures of Vanished Faces. And there is a pre-order link if anyone is interested in that. It's my first book, my first solo book, so I'm super excited about that.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I see, Matt, for those who are watching, for the audience, I should say, Matt just put the Aaron's website link in the side chat, and so thanks, Matt. And do the same for Dave if you can. And
Could you
Linz.
tell me the publisher again?
Cursed Morsels Press, and I can stick the pre-order link in the chat if that's okay too.
Sure.
All right, here we go.
Linz, yes.
Hello, I'm so sorry. My cat knows how to lift the toilet seat and it has just been banging it for the last 20 seconds, and I'm about to get up and tell him off. I didn't teach him this.
That's
No one
great.
admits to having taught him this. And he only does it when I'm on a call. So, hi, I'm Linz McLeod. I am a writer across many genres, to both the delight and chagrin of, I think, my agent and myself. I have a story in this anthology called Sticks and Stones, which is a pun. And I do write some kind of cosmic horror stuff. And I had a eco horror sun vampire novella come out last year. And I also had a story called One by One, which is very cosmic horror, which was out in the Apex issue in January as well.
What
Okay.
was the name of the novella?
Sunbathers. It sounds so happy, and it's not. Not at all.
And I should say hello to everybody who's watching live and watching later. And Cisco says it's good to see everyone. So Corey, you know how this works. You've been here before.
Yeah, so I'm Corey Fahrenkopf. I'm the author of Haunted Ecologies, which is an eco-horror short story collection. It came out 2 weeks ago. Mike had me on like 2 days after it came out, and that was great. You can get that basically anywhere books are sold, except for Amazon right now, and I don't know why they don't have physical copies. It's very strange. I'm
Wow.
also the author of Living in Cemeteries, and I've got a story in this, like everyone else has a story in this. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and Christy next, but before that, I just want to say, contrary to popular opinion, writers are not wealthy typically. So please buy their books that they mention. So, Christy, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Christy Noble. Please buy my books. I would really appreciate it. I have the two horror books that I have are my novel Beulah and The Best of Our Past, The Worst of Our Future, which is a short story collection from Flame Tree Press. I also wanted to put a word in for Dave's because I got to read that earlier and it was really good.
Okay. Couple quick things. If you're not familiar, and a lot of people who watch all the time are not familiar yet, but if you look in the show notes, there's a few links down. You'll see a link that I've titled "Stay on the Loop." It's basically a MailChimp mailing list, and you'll get 2 to 3 emails a week, basically just reminding people, hey, we're having this person on Sunday, or the little podcast, 1 or 2 podcasts that I do in the week. You won't get any spam. You won't get more than 2 or 3, and you can unsubscribe whenever you want to. So I want everyone to feel free I don't really want people to feel like they need to take turns talking today. Typically, I'm interviewing one creative person as opposed to a lot of them. So please just think of it as we're all around the bar talking about this. So did I get everybody? I think I did. So
Yeah, I think so.
but I would like to start with the editor, Patrick. And
Sure.
when you sent me this email, I'm like, and one day we will die. Strange stories inspired by the music of Neutral Milk Hotel. And I thought, what the hell? And I've never heard of them. And of course, I Googled them and everything. But who are they, or were they, Patrick?
Sure. Neutral Milk Hotel was a band. Sort of their heyday was in like the late '90s to early 2000s originally. Based out of Ruston, Louisiana. They then moved to Athens, Georgia, and were part of this sort of collective of lo-fi, sort of folky, psychedelic musicians, including Apples in Stereo, Elf Power, and a few other bands as well. I want to say Neutral Milk Hotel is probably one of the best known of that group, headed up by Jeff Mangum, who is I consider a genius songwriter, but also a bit of a recluse. He went away for a while, or just was not in the public eye. They came back for a tour in, I want to say, 2013 to 2015, and that was their last show, and have since sort of not been around again. I found out about them in high school, and some cool kids in study hall were talking about the band, and I wanted to be cool, obviously. So I thought, I'll check this band out, and it's the weirdest but also most delightful music that I'd ever heard, and it's got a little bit of this poppy kind of 3-chord sound, but also it gets very strange and weird, and it's about history, it's about folklore, it's all these things, and I just always been obsessed with the band. I got a chance to see them when they were on their little the reunion tour that they had, and when something is so varied in its creativity, I always feel like, okay, that's something that could be a good fuel for an anthology. And
Yeah.
I sort of said, like, okay, this band has so many different sounds, so many different emotions that the music evokes in me. Maybe other people will agree. And luckily, that turned out to be the truth.
So what I got out of that was we're all here right now because you wanted to be cool in high school.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't like the cool kids. They were like the cool weird kids. I want to be a
Right.
cool weird kid. So let me just make that sure that's clear.
And everyone, please don't think when someone else is talking that you have to mute your microphone. I want everyone to feel free to speak up anytime. I mean, you can if you want to, but you don't have to. Patrick, I meant to find some music by this band and listen to it, and the week just got away from me. It was crazy. But I guess my first question is, how does this is not a critical question, but how does this inspire an anthology, a horror anthology?
Sure. I think what I take away from the music is, like I said before, there is this variety of emotion. And I think horror and confusion and those sort of fear are definitely the emotions that are there. There's also melancholy. There is like a uplifting sense to a lot of the songs as well. Sometimes from line to line, you can get that sweeping sense of going from like terror to uplifting joy. And when looking for authors and looking at the stories that were submitted during the open call, my mission, I felt like, was less to find stories that directly referenced the songs or directly referenced the band or had the kind of same exact elements that Jeff Mangum puts in his music. So
Right.
there's a lot of references to Anne Frank, World War II, strange kind of folk characters as well. And I mean, I think really Matthew Kressel's story in the anthology is the only one that directly sort of addresses the Anne Frank element that's big in Mangum's writing, and he does a really wonderful job with it. It's the one reprint in the collection, but in the anthology. But I really feel like just a fantastic story, kind of an alternate history if Anne Frank had lived, and sort of like this exploration of what the world would be like and the ripple effect from there. And what I was looking for with the stories was more the mood, more that sense of what I felt listening to the music, listening to the songs. And so the stories that were selected were ones that had this kind of range of emotions to them that would maybe start out in one way and then take you on kind of an emotional journey, as well as, a character, the regular kind of plot progression as well. And so that was my goal, is to have an anthology that people could read and hopefully get the feel of what listening to Neutral Milk Hotel was like without having to listen to the band. Although, again, if they like that, if they like what they read, then they should also probably listen to the band as well.
Are they on Spotify? I mean, imagine they are, but maybe not. Or on YouTube?
Yeah, we get a lot of YouTube stuff. You can get a lot of
Choices,
the B-sides and the everything, as well as the regular songs.
Right. So a question for everyone, whoever feels like piping up. What would you like to add to what Patrick just said? Because obviously the band inspires you too, since you've got a story in this anthology. So for anyone, what is it about this band that, you know, inspires you, pushes your buttons? So I'll just pick someone.
I can go with this.
Lens, there you
go. I didn't actually know this band at all before I saw this call.
Yeah.
And so I went, okay, let me go check them out. And the more I listened to them and the more I thought, I like, this exact vibe and this atmosphere that they're invoking. Like, I actually did an event not too long ago on hauntology. And while I was putting together a presentation for something, I thought, oh, I know exactly what I'm referencing, but I didn't know at the time that that's what I was referencing, but I was referencing hauntology before I really clocked what it was. And it's this kind of nostalgia for something that may not have actually existed. And that's kind of what it feels like listening to this music. So thank you for a very cool call, because I might never have listened to this band otherwise. I can get very stuck in my own tracks. But I don't often listen to music to get inspired, but there are songs that you can pick out like a line or something else that it just sort of jump starts. And I had listened to the song that I ended up choosing from the list, and I thought, this is giving me a specific image, and I ended up writing the image of a girl who kept turning into a doe and then back to a girl standing on the banks of the river Styx, unable to pass. And I thought that's a lot to get from this song, but that's the kind of feeling that I'm getting from it.
Patrick, I feel like me, and as Lens just said, and with this this podcast episode today, you're introducing a lot of people to this band who may not have heard about them before now.
Yeah, I mean, that's secretly the real goal. Other than making money from having people buy the book, please buy the book. It also to get them to listen to the music, because it was just something I thought was cool, and you want to share things that you find cool and enjoy, and find this new way to kind of reinterpret it and bring my area of immediate interest, like writing and books and everything, and sort of combine those things together.
Who else is there anyone else here who had not heard of the band or listened to the band prior to Patrick reaching out to you? Anyone, or was everyone else?
I would say I
Yeah.
had heard of them and I had heard them, but I wasn't like one of their cult followers or anything. I think I was a little bit too old, you know. I think when they came out and they were so popular, I wasn't, you know, as into music as maybe I was when I was younger.
Anyone else? And if not, I'd love for a few of you to pipe up and, tell the audience and me your feelings about the band and how it inspires you. Corey, sure.
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. So I have probably been listening to them since I was in like seventh grade or something like that. My buddy Cashel was really into them, and his brother showed him the band because his brother always like showed us all the cool bands, and we spent a lot of time. He had like a mini ramp in his garage, so he would just skateboard on the mini ramp, listening to Neutral Milk Hotel, and was like, "This is sweet." But I also went to Catholic school, and the song that I wrote about, the first lines are basically, "I love you, Jesus Christ," just repeated and repeated. And when I was in church, sometimes I would just think about that song like in the back of my head, because like I had to go to church every week, like twice a week, and like I wasn't listening to what they were saying. I just had like my own random things playing in my head. And so like Neutral Milk Hotel did a really good job of like weaving into that, because a lot of their stuff has like almost like a pseudo religious or like folklory kind of feel to it. So like it kind of went really well with my strange religious upbringing, which wasn't like intensely religious. I just went to Catholic school. I don't
Yeah.
know. But they also have there's two songs on that CD that I also really found like wicked haunting when I was younger, like O Comely and what's the other one? Oh, I can't remember I'm terrible at remembering names of things. So I remember those two songs being just like, I don't like to listen to these because they make me feel strange, but like let me listen to like In an Airplane Over the Sea or like Holland 1945. Like those are great and happy, but these other ones are wicked dark and they make me feel strange as a child.
I'm really looking forward to this. And Aaron, you wanted to talk to say some things. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I might date myself a little bit here, but I don't know if anybody remembers there was an episode of The Simpsons where they were trying to explain to their mom, Marge, how to be cool. And step one was to not actually want to be cool, because that's the only way you could be cool. I was in high school when I discovered Neutral Milk Hotel, and it was the epic anti-cool. Like, you were weird, but you didn't care. And the fact that you didn't care was awesome. So you had to work really hard to not care, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I think that the underlying message, like, it sounds really trivial, but the underlying message, just don't give a crap what people think about you, was revolutionary to us, because at the time, at least when I was in high school, being accepted was survival, and that there was an alternative was revolutionary. So listening to this band that was discordant and odd, and I don't know what these instruments were, and he's rageful and lustful and creepy and all this, things that kids actually are in high school, it kind of settled us down. It's like, okay, well, if this is allowed, then I guess I'm all right. And that kind of feeling it was like coming home a little bit. So I think reasons why I really loved the music, and I was introduced to it by like a proto hipster, like the people who were just learning that being passionate about stuff was okay again. Yeah, and I listened to it. I was like, this is really, really, really strange. This is interesting to meet a band that wants to be really strange. I'm kind of strange, so I guess maybe I have a place here. And I think that that's one of the things that I found was a through ribbon through a lot of the stories, was just like, we're here and we're all strange, so you are in good company. And I hope the readers pick up on that.
That is so interesting, though, the way that they influenced you in high school and really made you feel like it's okay to be different, So I'm going to go back to everyone in a little bit, and want you to talk about your story and tell the audience about your story in the book for spoiler free for the audience. But staying on the band for a few minutes, who else would like to chat about this?
I'll
Brian.
talk for just a minute.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, the thing I love about them is there's this kind of absurdity to the lyrics. And that kind of combines, like Corey was talking earlier about this kind of religious theme, but it's like it's the contrast, the tension between what was going on there and how the song is being sung sometimes as well. And so there's always these tensions in the band that just really appealed to me. And so the piece I worked with is called Garden Head, and it's so kind of, it's not surreal exactly, but there's a kind of absurdity to the lyrics and the way they came together that I felt like I could keep on listening to, not only that song but to a lot of their songs over and over again, and just always be finding new things. And there's also, I think, the thing that appealed to me so much is there's almost a kind of DIY quality to the songs. It's very stripped down, very kind of, lo-fi, but in a way that still felt like very genuine and very original to me. And so that when I got the call, that was the thing that made me excited, is can I capture some of that in terms of what I'm doing myself?
This was about what, 1998, this band, Neutral Milk Hotel. Does that sound right?
Like 98, 99, I think was,
Yeah.
I think 99 was In the Airplane Over the Sea.
Yeah.
Just kind of the biggest album, the second one.
So, Aaron, you're not dating yourself too badly. If you were in high school in 1999, I had already been married for 3 years, and I did not marry young. So way older. You're doing fine. Who else would like to talk about the band and their feelings about it? John? No? He's
Just
the old
I just
guy's
have to
looking for
unmute
the
myself.
mute button.
I know. I was like, "Where do I do this? Do I press this button?" Oh my
You press
God.
any key. Where's the any key?
Where's any, right? Yeah, I knew them. I knew Neutral Milk Hotel through two sources. One was my younger son was in a rock academy, and one of the songs that they did for the rock academy was a Neutral Milk Hotel song, which was they tried to cover an eclectic bunch of songs. So it certainly fit into that eclectic mix of songs, but obviously it was very different, and it had actually they were allowed to pick us. He was in the Rock Academy show band. They traveled, and the kids were allowed to pick different songs. So this song had been picked by one of his friends who was kind of famous for his eclectic tastes. Then it was like, wow, this is really crazy. This is some cool stuff. And the other source for me for it was Paul Tremblay, who was always berating me about my terrible taste in everything, especially music. And and he's right. I mean, I own it. I'm still listening to Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, and
Barry Manilow too, right? At least that's what Paul told me.
All right, look, Copacabana. How can you go wrong with Copacabana?
John, I listened to Copacabana yesterday and I tapped along.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Her name was Lila. Anyway, she was a showgirl. But so I Paul and other such people, are constantly trying to improve my taste. So I had listened to Neutral Milk Hotel in part because of them as well. And when Patrick's invitation came through, it just seemed like such a wild idea, like how would you make music out of these songs? And we can talk more about this in the next round, but I was particularly interested in the other songs that they had done, aside from the big album. And I was really fascinated too. I sort of went down this rabbit hole of reading the 33 and a third book about them. And then also there's another study whose name just went right out of my head, which is about the Elephant Six Collective and so on. And I found all of that was just super cool and really fascinating. So yeah, there was a lot in a way to work.
By the way, Cisco just said Margaritaville again, John. So
we are all wasting away in Margaritaville.
Anyone else on the band?
I can say a little bit. I heard Neutral Milk
I'm
Hotel.
sorry, you write under, what is your pen name?
D. Matthew Urban.
D. Matthew Urban.
Most transparent pen name in the world, but too many Dave Urbans to be confused with.
I just
But
don't want people trying to look you up on Google and not finding your books or anything.
yeah,
So
you'll
anyway.
find the Republican mega donor Dave Urban, who is not me, I promise. But yeah, I first heard of Neutral Milk Hotel in college. I heard them on the college radio station, and I think the song that I heard was Two-Headed Boy. And what drew me to them was the kind of surreal, non-linear imagery of the lyrics combined with just this really intense emotion of both Mangum's voice and the music, combined, and kind of the simplicity of it, all kind of coming together into this really effective combination where you're not always sure what the songs are like literally about, and they're kind of enigmatic in a cool way, but there's always this very strong emotional through line, and I think that's what first drew me to them. And yeah, so I was mainly aware of In the Airplane Over the Sea, but when I saw this call, I kind of delved into the rest of their catalog and discovered they have a lot of other great songs too.
Did I get everyone on talking about the band itself? I think I did.
Yeah, I think so.
Let me just read the synopsis of the book. And again, the title is And One Day We Will Die. Strange stories inspired by the music of Neutral Milk Hotel. Celebrate the strangeness of being anything at all, which I love, Patrick. Spotlighting the bizarrely beautiful and beautifully bizarre music and lyrics of indie folk rock band Neutral Milk Hotel. And One Day We Will Die features 22 short stories from the realms of weird, phantasmagoric, and speculative fiction, all inspired by the cult classic songs written and performed by Jeff Mangan and company. Part I wanted to get to especially was this, it goes on, from alternate histories where happy endings are allowed, and mythological reimaginings that center love over destruction to awe-inspiring contemplations of the potential in the present and dark and unfathomable future visions. All featured authors selected one song from the beloved Neutral Milk Hotel songbook to use as a springboard for their ideas. So, with that said, Patrick, would you start with Adam Clare's introduction and why you wanted him to
Yeah,
introduce it?
yeah,
Or
absolutely.
forward, I should say. Sorry.
Yeah. So give a little background, behind the scenes baseball about the project. Originally, it was set up with another publisher, Hungry Shadow Press, who Brandon, who runs that press, who ran that press, did a lot of great work to kind of get everybody set up, get the authors on board, help me, get the thing together, get me in contact with the people that I needed, including the cover art as well. So Adam was part of that outreach that he did, and Adam Clare was the writer of the Elephant Six history, the Elephant Six mystery. It's called Endless, a lo-fi history of the Elephant Six mystery. So he had worked in this space and covered not only Neutral Milk Hotel, but all the other Elephant Six bands. And so it seemed like a natural choice to present the stories outside of somebody from the band or like the music space, so somebody that was connected to the space, but also in the writing sphere as well. So I was really happy with how it came out. That was a plus. And then also, as I mentioned, the cover art, I want to give like a special shout out
Excuse
to that.
me. Yeah, okay, I was going to ask you to do just that, and keep holding that up. I'm going to spotlight for everyone. And then, yes, sorry, go on.
Yes, so this cover is actually done by Chris Bilheimer, who is a very famous album designer, album artist. If you go to his website, his portfolio is just pictures of David Letterman holding up different albums that he did the art for. He did a lot of the REM album art. He did the album art for Neutral Milk Hotel, actually. And so this was a big get for us, I thought, and wanted to have that sort of kind of continuity with the music as well and with the albums. And so this cover here is definitely, Chris provided it, and one of the sort of the Ferris wheel on fire is one of the later sort of like retrospective albums from the band as well. So this is a variation on that. Just really did a killer job, and I was really glad that we had that to kind of give it a little bit more oomph to add to the already quite a bit of oomph we have from the authors included.
Well, that does sound like a big get for you. That's great.
Yeah, and he was, just a great guy to work with. Always find that people who are like well known and well established in these spaces, they usually, knock wood, are very down to earth and very like, yeah, it sounds cool. I mean, I'd love to do this. It's different than what I'm normally doing, and that's always a good way in. I think sometimes with projects to say like, this is not what your usual work is, and that's always like something that kind of pings the radar for folks a lot of times.
It occurs to me that as we're chatting, some of you might want to ask one of the other writers a question, and I just want everyone to feel free to speak up and say whatever. Going down the table of contents, the first story that I see by someone who is here is Dave, or D. Matthew Urban. So could you talk about your story for a couple minutes? Spoiler free, of course.
Sure. So my story is called Just the Motion, and it's inspired by the song Little Birds, which is a non-album track by Nutrimilk Hotel. I think it was released as a single, or maybe it was just a demo, but I found it in the depths of Apple Music, looking through the Nutrimilk Hotel catalog. I had not heard it until I was hunting for something for this call, or kind of combing through their catalog, and the song is very heart-wrenching. It's kind of this very sad song about basically about a child who is abused and treated badly by his parents, and has this wonderful imagery of this water imagery, and this kind of sense of washing down into a sea. And I kind of took those themes and that kind of that imagery and that feel, and wrote a story about a person who's visiting the coast of the Gulf of Mexico with his daughter, coming back to a place where when he was a kid, he had a traumatic experience, partially something that happened in the water, and also from having a terrible bastard of a father. And that kind of combination of the past and the present kind of weaving together in the story is kind of what I tried to sort of how I tried to take the themes from the song and put them into a narrative and into kind of what I hope is, kind of a story that captures some of that same horror and sadness of the song. And it's also based on, the setting is based on my own memories of being on the Gulf of Mexico coast with my family as a kid. I grew up in Texas, though I now live in New York. So we would go to Galveston and Port Bolivar for vacation, and kind of drew on those memories of being on that beach, as kind of part of the setting of the story and the background of it.
The questions I had for you on this, you answered them all already. So should I assume that you picked this one because it's your favorite of all the band's work, or do you have another favorite?
It's a great song. I don't know if it's my favorite. Partially I picked it strategically because I felt like everyone, there would be a lot of people writing about the songs on the albums, and I didn't want to be in competition with Brian Evanson if I wrote a song about Garden Head, Leave Me Alone. And I figured there would be fewer fewer people writing about these B-sides, but also it was a song that really, like, when I listened to it, it had a big, had a big emotional impact, and was a little bit, I'd say a little bit of an outlier in their catalog in terms of both the kind of the sound of it to some extent. It's kind of this very, like, almost kind of like a punk dirge sound for the first part of it, and then the end is this very ethereal or kind of reverie-like section. And I kind of like that structure, and that kind of going from this really intense driving part in the beginning to this kind of this sort of more expansive lulling part at the end. I kind of tried to capture that structure a little bit in the story as well. And just one other thing to say about the story, I guess the title, Just the Motion, is taken from a song by Richard and Linda Thompson from their great album, Shoot Out the Lights, which is also a song about the ocean, but I also thought it was just it was amusing to me to have a song in an anthology based on one band that has a title taken from another band. So that was where I got that title from.
Love it. Yeah, I think Dave's story is one of I found the most terrifying in part, as far as like it being more, it's kind of like horror element to it. But like he said, it does expand out emotionally and sort of has this almost melancholic, haunting note at the end. We had 11 authors who were invited, and they all picked their songs. So those songs were off the table for everyone else. And then we had the rest of the catalog. We're looking for about 10 to 11 other authors. We ended up getting 11 others. And, there were some songs that I thought were going to be high competition. Only like one person sent something in for, or two people or something. But then it was not just a case of wanting to have every song. We wanted to have the right feel. Because there were some other stories that I thought were fantastic, just great sort of like chilling, creepy horror stories, but they didn't have that sort of other emotional uplift or sort of turn to them. And it's one of those things as editor, I guess, or like anthologizer, where you're just like, well, this is a great story, but it doesn't fit my vision, so to speak, for the project. And so I had a lot of cases where I was like, well, I'm looking forward to reading this story somewhere else because it's that good, but it's just not right here.
Yeah, and for the any beginning writers out there who are listening, that's something important to remember, that your story may not have been rejected from an anthology or a magazine because they thought it was terrible. It just didn't fit exactly with what they needed. Someone else will want it. So it looks like Christy Nogle has a short story in here called The Project, so we're gonna pick on her next.
Yeah, so there are a few things I wanted to make sure and mention.
Yeah.
First, I was one of the invited authors, and I think we actually announced our story titles really early on, and so many people commented on the social media posts and stuff saying, oh, that's my favorite song. And so I felt like really pressured to do a good job with the story because I knew there were a lot of people who would have liked to have written on it. This was a story about a woman who's working in a new media form. She's kind of like a pop artist, but she's doing virtual reality presentations. And she's gone to sort of a backwoods intentional community that's all offline, off grid, to try to finish up a piece that's based on her mother's diaries from the 90s. So it was working with like Jeff Magnum's ideas around like being a recluse later and having to deal with these fans who kind of felt like they owned him. I did a lot of like reading into his biography and stuff like this. And just sort of this magic of an album that's so idiosyncratic and so kind of uncompromising, and yet it got huge, and that's something I think we all want with our art, but it doesn't happen all that often. So it's just such a a wonderful thing. And that was a theme in my story as well. This idea that this art piece is going to be completely uncompromising, but it's also going to be huge and popular. This story, or this song, I should say, Corey mentioned a little bit ago as being really dark and creepy. It's got a lot of really lurid sexual imagery in it, and it's just kind of shocking lyrics in a way. And I love that about it. And I tried to kind of bring that into the story, as well as this sense of retrofuturism that is pretty big in the album. You know, you have this idea of like these carrot people and sort of Victorian vintage postcard type imagery juxtaposed with spaceships and airplanes and stuff like that, which I really love.
Just real quick for anyone, um, I'd like to know just a little bit more about Jeff Mangum. I know he dropped out of the spotlight because of health issues or nerves or something like that, but that's all I know. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I mean, a big part of it. As Christy touched on, a lot of the sort of idiosyncrasies of the music, and he writes from I feel like the writing comes from a very personal place, and he has these motifs and themes that sort of interweave in the music, especially if you listen to In the Airplane Over the Sea, the album. There is a lot of part twos of songs and part threes, and there's lyrics from one will show up at the end of another song, and he's very it feels very personal. And there was some, I think people, when somebody has that level of sort of artistry and they've reached that level of fame, and maybe they weren't ready for it, or maybe it's just not something that they want to share it through their art. And I get that totally. Like, when you're an artist, you want to share your perspective on the world through your art. That's the vehicle that you're expressing yourself through. And then when people say like, well, hey, why don't we have you express it through an interview question, or we're going to follow you around, or we're going to write articles about you and cover you on these like music sites and things like that. And I just think what happened there was somebody pulling back and saying like, no, I share it through the music. And if I don't have anything to say through the music or through my art, then you're not going to hear anything from me.
Yeah.
And so I think, when they had that reunion, a tour that was in the sort of early 2010s, they went, did the shows, and I think it was enough time had passed, I think, for him to feel comfortable. But even then, I remember going to one of the shows, and it was like, no cameras, no video, please, like, don't take picture, don't do anything, like, just keep your phone away. This is before they were putting phones in like the lock boxes or whatever they do at some comedy shows and things. But there was definitely like this sense of like, this is an artist and he's made this request. And like, when I was there, everybody was very observant of that request. They were like, okay, we're just gonna watch and be with the music, so to speak.
that creative thing, writer, artist, podcaster, what editor, whatever, is that thing that for so many of us, it's the thing you can't not do. You just have to do it. And the other part of that can be really disconcerting. I've seen for a lot of people. Frankly, I don't understand why anyone would want to be famous. It seems like kind of a loss of freedom. I can't go down to the store or whatever without getting mobbed. Is not a life I'd want to live. So yeah, of course John deals with that every day, and I've seen how that's negatively impacted his life. So
I don't want to be crass, Mike, but money. That's why you want to deal with it. Money. I can hire people to go to the store. No, I can't. But I mean, in theory, in the little fantasy world I live in, I spend most of my day, and to help me escape from the hellscape that is our reality, I send my personal manservant down to the store, down to Whole Foods, and he brings back whatever it is I need.
Well, you remember what Ray Bradbury said, Zen and the Art of Writing. You must stay drunk on writing so that reality does not destroy you. So
Yeah, I've modified that to just I must stay drunk.
so anyone else can modify writing to whatever that creative thing is that you do. Um, Lindsay McLeod wrote a book called Sticks and Stones, STYX, and will you tell us about that and anything else you want to say?
Yeah, so as I say, I had this kind of image of someone on the banks of the Styx, which if you know any Greek, you probably already kind of know, and has what is usually portrayed as a ferryman, but in this case is a ferry woman or perhaps a ferry person, depending on who you are when you reach the shore. Um, and I kind of thought, we're always seeing someone like people being ferried across in the boat. It's just this one kind of transition in this journey. But I know that if you can't pay for passage in some way, then you are not allowed to pass. There's like a punishment. You have to wait on the shore for 100 years. What happens when that's the case? Like, who are you going to talk to? You can only talk to the ferry person. 100 years is a long time to be hanging out with someone alone. And what's going to happen there? It might a bond develop in some way. Might it be weird? And I thought it was worth exploring. And then I looked at the lyrics for quite a few of the songs and was like, oh man, I wish I had written about carrot-headed people. That would have been cool. And I still would like to do that. I'm not sure if headed or faced, but we'll see. But I was really into my dough. And the lyrics to Someone Is Waiting seemed to fit really well with the vibe that I was going for. The first lines is quite a short, like lyrically quite a short song. Hey, someone is waiting to swallow all the halos out of you. And I thought, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Considering this is like a transition point in the underworld, I really like how that imagery is coming together. So no spoilers for what happens, but Hades and Persephone make brief appearances and everything's kind of kicking around in the underworld.
Thank you. Getting back to Mangum and fame for a second, have any of you seen? You probably have the vampire movie Only Lovers Left Alive. It's my favorite vampire film,
Yeah.
and it makes me think of I forget the actor's name, the Loki guy. I don't know. I'm like Corey.
Tom Hiddleston.
Tom Hiddleston. Yeah. Yes, thank you. In the beginning, you remember where near the beginning where these people like show up, they find out where you live, and they're like parked in the street or whatever. But he's talking to the guy who brings him things, kind of like John's manservant idea, and he's like, you being such a recluse is only going to want them to find you more. Or I'm telling this terribly, but Tom Hiddleston goes, yeah, it's such a drag. So, Aaron Brown wrote a story for the anthology called Mirror Boy. So tell us about it, please.
So my song had no lyrics, and one of the reasons why was because by the time I had discovered the invitation to the anthology, the other two stories that I would have written about were acclaimed. So I was like, oh crap, okay, find another one. And music is so powerful and so specific. You really have to vibe with the right one to write something for it, for me. And most of the time when I'm not writing, for musical based anthologies, I don't listen to music with lyrics. So I went listening, kind of going through all of their B-side kind of stuff. And I found April 1st, which was just this sweet, melancholy, sad trombone, fairground music that I was like, oh, I could do so much. It's like, scary circus music without the fangs kind of thing, where it's just like the vampires kind of gumming on you and you don't know if you're scared or just slightly unnerved type music. I was, I can do something with this. And
Man, that's an image. You
this
should be
is
a writer. You have a hell of an imagination.
I do a bit of world building in my own brain, and then I live there. So, but yeah, I I wanted to write something for who I was when I was listening to this music, and not just who specifically I was, but the people that listened to it with me and were kind of on the same vibe as me. And as I was writing the story Mirror Boy, which is the story of a young man, we're like just post high school age, you know, early like community college style young man, but he's made out of mirror. He's just a giant walking boy shaped mirror. And he's working this weird summer job. There was, you know, maybe some overlap inspiration with that one movie that had Jesse Eisenberg and Kirsten Stewart in it when they were working at a fairground over the summer. That feel. I was thinking about just the isolation that comes with that transition from high school to college when you're trying to figure out who you are, and when your old friends who were your entire world are falling away and you haven't found your new friends yet. And and it was like, and as I was writing, just because of things that were happening in the world, I found myself wanting to write a bit of a letter to the incel. Like this was a young man who was put in positions that caused that kind of launch of that style of thinking, just people letting him down left and right, isolation, anger, hopelessness, powerlessness that were happening to this character. The fact that he was a mirror made it really clear that it was his choice to choose what he reflected of the things that he saw. And so when he was hanging out with his friends and his friends were the worst, he could either stay there and reflect that or leave and leave his friends behind. But that's lonely. So what do you choose? And then he goes and he wanders around and sees all these weird, grimy things around the fairground, but some of them were kind of beautiful. And if he was reflecting them, then was it the beauty or the grime that he was reflecting? Just the constant asking himself of who he was and having it apparent to other people before it was apparent to him, was kind of the point. And I wanted readers to leave the story thinking about what it was that they reflected of what they saw, and to, at the same time, you know, there's things that happen that just aren't fair, that aren't cool, that you have to cope with, and you do what you have to do to survive. But on the other side of that, it is your responsibility to create who you are in your environment. And no spoilers, of course, but it all falls apart for this kid. Everything falls apart for this kid, and it ends up being possibly the best thing that could have happened to him. So that was the reason for the story. And just listening to that track of just not just the track, but the cover art for that piece is this weird pink and pastel fairground. It's grimy and scratched up, so it looks a little bit like it's raining, and the sky is bright yellow, and I don't know why. All of those those visuals make appearances in my story, because the song and that cover was like, who would be wandering around this weird ass park on a rainy day? And that I answer that question with my main character, the Mirror Boy. So that's where that came from.
Thanks, Aaron. Before we go on, I want to just tell everyone that this book is available in hardcover, in paperback, and if you're a Kindle person, it's only $5.99 on Kindle. So yeah, there you go. Make sure you grab it. So, I'm sorry, Patrick. What?
I was just saying, there it is. And I just wanted to say about like Erin's story. You know, she sent me the original, like the idea she had, and we chatted about it, and I just was blown away purely by the sort of central conceit of the Mirror Boy. And there is this strong like coming of age feel, and you know, the darker side that Aaron mentioned here, like I just totally, it's totally there as well. But it had this sort of like, has this continuity with authors like Bradbury in terms of like fairgrounds and sort of like the images from the past, and sort of having that sort of element to it as well. King and like Joyland or something like that, I was also thinking about when I was reading the story. And it's really, yeah, it's a story that people have commented on, in reviews and stuff, and said things like, this is very touching, very, very kind of moving story for me. And I felt the exact same way. I was very, very happy to have it, as I am all the stories, of course.
I want to mention too that folks, when you buy this book, you'll see in the table of contents that each story it has which song or piece that it's inspired by. So you could potentially read a story, listen to that song, go on to the next story. It'd be kind of a neat way to read a book. So unique way to read a book. The Garden Head, short story by Brian Evanson. So
That's me.
that is you.
Yeah. So I should say very quickly, I'm out of the country right now, and I've had my internet sometimes goes down after midnight. So we'll see how. If I disappear, it's not a commentary on what other people are saying, but just commentary on the grid.
I hate the show. I'm leaving.
Yeah, exactly. This was probably the first song I heard by them, and it's a song that has stuck with me for a long, long time. When I got the call, I just it was something I wanted to write about, even though I knew that probably a lot of other people would try to submit under this title as well. And my idea with this is what I really tried to do with the song was just capture what it felt like for me to listen to it. So my kind of story is fairly abstract in terms of how it works. It kind of takes place in a space in which, non-realistic space in which it's not exactly clear what's going on, and just trying to put the reader into the mindset of how I felt like when I was listening to the song, and hopefully, at least to some degree, to give a sense of what it might have been like for him to write the song as well. But for me, the key moment in the song is there's a moment when he says, like the feeling you get when you realize you're dead, and that kind of was kind of what brought me forward with it. Yeah, and that's probably all I need to say about it.
Well, for the audience, I just want to say to you guys first. I've read Brian's latest book. A lot of the other authors here, besides Corey, are new to me. Besides Corey and Patrick, are new to me. If you've got my email address because I sent you the Zoom link. If you get time this evening, if you'd reply with a link to your latest or upcoming book, I will add that to the show notes and make sure that it's on the on Apple and Spotify show notes as well, because I want people to buy this book but then explore what else you've written. So please do that. And with that said, Brian's latest collection is, Sleep Tight, and I've told you this, but I just love that collection. And so
Thank
many
you.
of the stories are just this sense of unease, this sense of creeping dread
Yeah,
in them.
and this is like, I feel like this story could potentially go into that collection. There's a kind of unease to it, and unease to the
Yeah.
song too, if you know the song itself. Which is one of the things I really, I said earlier how much I love the tensions between the music and the lyrics, and a lot of neutral milk hotel stuff, and that's something I think with my fiction I try to get across as well.
Corey, you've done this
Yeah.
before. What's the name of your short story? I have it right
I
here, but
have.
you tell us.
It's called the Church of Our Lords, the Church of Dogs, and ironically, I might have a dog barking in the background of this for like ambient. Could you hear that bark right there?
No, I didn't.
Yes, great. I have headphones on, so I was like, please
But
let it not
I'm
be
half
you.
deaf, so probably not a good question for me.
Oh, that makes me a little sad. Yeah, so my story is based off the song King of Carrot Flowers Parts 2 and 3. I picked it because it starts off with like it's kind of like a religious chant of some sort in the beginning, or kind of like a hymn, and then it goes into this like chaotic punk song that's like real heavy distortion, very fast, and that just kind of like resonates with me. I usually listen to like more punky stuff, so it worked pretty well for me. But it's a story about these two boys that are kind of like conglomerates of myself and like my friends around between the ages of like 13, 14, 15. And they're both altar boys. And the church that this is mostly set in is basically the church I went to as a child, like all the time. But it's a dark fantasy version of the church. And there is this giant chamber beneath the church that is growing these like luminescent root vegetables that if the people at the church eat the root vegetables, they can talk to God. Um, but God upstairs in the church is like Jesus, but that's not actually the God they're praying to. They're praying to some other God beneath the church. Um, so that's kind of like the backbone of the story.
You have to be
And then
careful which direction those prayers go when you're praying.
this is very true. You could get the guy in the basement.
Right.
And the guy in the basement is not Satan. It's not that kind of thing. It's we're not going to go too much into that because that gets spoilery. But so that's like the backbone of the story, and the main like heart of the story is this these two boys who are like growing up, and they are like best friends, and they're like changing, and they're trying to figure out who they are, and they're trying to figure out how to navigate this world where they have been forced to like believe in a religion that doesn't really like resonate with them, and they don't really trust or believe in. So it's them coming to grips with that. It's them coming to grips with their friendship and like the love they have for one another, and like what extent they would go to like help one another, I will say. Again, brushing up against spoiler territory.
Yeah.
So that's the most of it. Originally, when I wrote it, I completely forgot that you're not allowed to have song lyrics in your stories. And so there was giant chunks. It would be like 4 lines from the song. It would have some kind of incantation thing going on. And then I was about to send it to Patrick, and I was like, oh no. Oh, I did the thing that I was explicitly told I wasn't allowed to do. And so I went back and rewrote a bunch of chunks to change out these like little incantation things into making it kind of like this other strange thing, which worked out really well. But the song mentions like these dead dogs in a sort of way, and that really like wove into the story. Yeah, that's most of my thing.
That's a pretty huge thing. Song lyrics and stories that can get you in a lot of trouble.
It can. And in my brain, I did that thing where I was like, was it song titles or song lyrics that you can't use? And I picked the wrong one. And then I went back and fixed it. So it is fine. There are no song lyrics in there.
And we moved away from the song titles as well. We tried to avoid any kind of direct, like Brian's story. The song itself is Garden Head, 1 word. Brian's story is the Garden Head, 2 words. A little bit of editorial influence there. Just wanted to cover all my bases. You know, we reached out to talked to the record label and everything, and they were on board. They said, "Sure, great." I'm sure they were like, "Oh, weird fiction, sure, fine, whatever that is." And I think some lyrics probably sneak in to some of the stories. I'm absolutely sure there are some that I've seen, but I claim sort of I didn't see it till afterwards, sort of thing. Like I didn't know.
Forgiveness instead of permission.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And so there's the influences there, and I find that in my own fiction, like I'll have lyrics woven into the writing and not even realize it till after the fact. So I give a little grace to folks on that point.
Corey, someone just asked about the name of your short story again. So.
Oh, it's the Church of Our Lords, period. The Church of Dogs, period.
Okay. I think that's what you were asking, Haruka. Well, I think that's everyone, isn't it? Yeah, pretty sure. No, you go, John. I know.
You son of a bitch. Yeah. Oh man. I think I have the story with the longest title.
Looks like, yeah.
But I'm not sure. To the extent that I'm like, I don't even remember all of the titles. So you can go ahead and read it for me.
Well, the title is "For the Rest of Our Lives, We Will Wait in You," a record.
Thank you.
Inspired
I thought
by
that was
Youth
it.
Past. Yeah.
Yeah. The story.
You thought that's what your ghostwriter had written? You weren't sure?
Right. Exactly. That was my manservant. But he does a lot of work. So.
Well, Well, he makes you
I
look good.
actually, he does. Yeah, I'm really happy with it. It's so the song that I picked, "You've Passed," I didn't want to pick something off Airplane Over the Sea. I felt that everyone was going to pick that, and the song that I picked, I just kind of was like listening to stuff, kind of randomly. Not that there's a huge new catalog of songs, but I came across this one called "You've Passed." And I think when Dave was describing his song, he was saying, it's kind of like this dirge, this kind of like punk dirge or something like that. That was kind of how I felt about this song too. That there's this it just kind of it's kind of crunchy sounding and kind of grainy, and it's just about this kind of moment of loss. And so I was really thinking about that, like, what can I do? And at the same time, I was listening to the audiobooks of a bunch of John Crowley's stuff. I was listening to, and this is John Crowley, author of Little Big and other classics. I was listening to him reading Little Big and listening to him reading his fantasy novel about a crow, Ka, and listening to him reading the first volume of his Egypt tetralogy. And his kind of style just like got in my head. I was just like, okay, I have to, whatever I'm writing next, I have to write, in this style. And I was also, as I mentioned before, reading some of the stuff about the band. So all of this kind of, sort of came together into this story that, I was writing in these great big long paragraphs in best, sort of Crowley. I mean, I write big long paragraphs, but I mean, fashion. And I thought to myself, as I was writing these paragraphs, wouldn't it be kind of cool if this was a record? Like, what if I structured this as a record so that every paragraph would be like a different track on the album? And I thought, well, what if it was an old style record, a vinyl record, where you actually had an A side and a B side, and the A side, everything would be written in present tense, and then the B side, everything would be written in future tense. And so yeah, there were all these kind of like intellectual things I was kind of playing with. Patrick was like, "Is it done yet? Is it done yet?" And I was like, "Hang on, I have to figure out the name for this imaginary track and how long I think it would be."
Yeah, I'm familiar.
And
I'm in the club now.
yeah, and there's a T-shirt actually. Yeah,
Oh, all right,
Ellen
send it to
Datlow
me.
makes them. Yeah, and I
He
just
gave me one recently.
There's really a T-shirt? How come
Oh,
we
yeah, we
don't
had a
have one
long.
of these? How come I don't
The
have
last
one?
time Ellen was here, we had a long conversation about who pisses her off the most. And
And John's name came up.
I think I like to think I'm at the top of the list.
Yeah, you are this week.
And so yeah, and in a sense, what I was interested in the story was the idea of the kind of muse figure. I was thinking about and I was thinking about, I guess, in sort of conventional ways, in the sense that I imagined a male group called the George Herbert Collective, who are basically my sort of stand-in for Neutral Milk Hotel, but who summons someone to them. And this person becomes part of the legendary of the band while not actually being in the band exactly, except she is kind of in the band because every time you see them, she's there. And I this is going to sound really cryptic because I'm trying not to be too spoilery, but in Crowley's Little Big, one of the things that's going on in that novel is that there's a community of fairies in the Tolkien sense, who are basically leaving our world, and they're going to be. It's a story about replacement, about who's going to replace them, and so I kind of realized afterwards, honestly, after I finished the story, that I was writing a story about that muse leaving the world and who was going to replace her. So there's a lot of the first part of the story, the first side of the record, is very much about a young woman who like myself, like is too cool for the cool things. You know, like when everybody wants, like, as long as some people aren't interested in something, I'm not, I'm interested in it. And then the minute, you know, like when The Walking Dead became popular, I'd read the comics first, but when it became popular, I was like, I'm not interested in it. And everybody was watching it and reading it. And I
So
was
in
like,
other
no, it
words,
was
you were country when country wasn't cool.
exactly. And then when country became cool, I was like, screw you, Garth Brooks. And so but she finally embraces the music, and then makes a trip, like a sort of pilgrimage, if you will, to the house where the music was recorded, which is just a series of like static rooms. But I hoped, was trying to describe static things in a way that made them interesting. Um, so yeah, I was in my head for like an awful lot of this, but I was really grateful to Patrick to give me the opportunity to write something that was just like genuinely kind of weird or strange. You know, however you, those terms are so slippery, right? But like I wanted something that was that brought you to the sublime at certain points, but in a different way than I guess I would usually do, which is like, I wanted something that was more possibly still kind of shattering in a way, or transformative in a way, but uh, uh, but in a different direction, I guess.
Yeah, and this was one of the stories. I think it's maybe the one that most directly covers music. And I thought when John came back with the album track listing, the way that the paragraphs were divided in the sections, I felt like it was the perfect note, excuse the pun, to end uh, the anthology on, because throughout the rest of the stories, there is, I think, in maybe a significant percentage of them, an exploration of the act of creation of something being either made or unmade. There's a photographer. There's a story by Helen V. Murray, which is about um, a photography study of a photographer's work. There's Christie's story, The Project. All these tales that kind of deal with creation, and then being able to end with music and tie it more directly to the band, and to sort of have that the John Langan universe version of Neutral Milk Hotel sort of fill that role at the end. And it's an interesting story, because that was the mood that I was going for with the story. As I was telling people, it's not just horror. It's not just a straight horror anthology here, because the music's not just horror either. It touches on this sort of the awe-inspiring and the awesome, in that sort of like big sense of the word, without necessarily being like, bah, something scary is coming out at the end of the story. So in rereading John's story and other stories, I think you're left with a lot of times at the end of them this sense that they can be taken in a lot of different directions. You can sort of see, you think you know how it's ended, but then you read it a second time and it's like, well, I missed this part. I missed how this came together, or
Right.
something else stands out there.
Yeah, I was also, towards the end of the story, for whatever reason, I started to think about these paintings by De Chirico, where you have these landscapes where they're like these sort of vast landscapes, but you feel like you're seeing you're seeing them from this weird angle, and there's something that you're not seeing, but that is somehow implied by what you are seeing, and that seemed like really cool. And then, yeah, at the very end, I included a hidden track. I wrote this little song for the end of it. I'm trying to convince my son to record it so that I can be like, look.
So I don't want to keep you guys all night, especially Brian, because it's very late for him. So anyone needs to pop out, please do so. I'll just keep you another 5 or 10 minutes at most. But first, I've got a question, and then I've got a question from the live audience. I'm sure as writers, you've been asked this many times, but he wants to know, and I really like the way he said it. He said, please ask the panel what inspires them to write. I'm curious what causes the itch. And so anyone who feels like fielding that one, if someone asked me that, I'd be like, I don't know what causes the itch. I just know I love doing this creative thing. So yes, Linz, please.
I don't think I know what it's like to not be itchy. I think I'm itchy all the time. So maybe that's a condition.
Yeah.
But I think I've described it as a story doesn't always feel like a pretty little flower that has, something has planted a seed in me and it's taken its time. And sometimes it feels like there's a splinter in my skin and it's irritating me until I can work it out. And once you do, the relief of sort of feeling that makes it sound like it's a terrible process, but and also I think I'm inspired by almost everything. There is no idea so stupid that I won't try it at least twice. And even then, maybe a third time just to see if I was really sure that it wouldn't work. My collection, Turducken, is named because I was like, what if a turducken was sentient, actually? How would that be? And could I make you care about it and maybe cry?
Oh,
And
come on,
so
Linz.
again,
Every single writer on Earth has had that idea. No, I'm kidding. That's
it's
pretty unique.
it's fun. Yeah. I mean, genuinely, I was like, someone must have done this already. No, okay, I'm just the weirdo. But you've got to try things. There's no like crack team waiting to break into your laptop and post your first drafts to like Facebook or something. Because if they exist, I'm in huge trouble. But you've got to try things. You only live once, as far as we know.
Aaron. Yeah, Aaron's out in the forest right now. So
Yes, I am. Yes. Why do I write? Maladaptive daydreaming caused by neurodivergency and reinforced by hyperfixation. I live in my head, and when people ask me why, I want to give them answers. And so that's pretty much it. I create worlds that make sense of what I see when I can't make sense of what I see. And it makes for some entertaining content every now and then. And so I try to sell it.
anyone else want to field that?
I'll just add, like, speaking, from the editor side of things, the anthologist side,
Yeah.
in this case, creation for me is all about, like, you want to put something out into the world that isn't there, but you think like, oh, this needs to be there. We need to have this be a part of it. There's certain arrogance to it, I know. And in this case, it was like, I'd love to read an anthology of Neutral Milk Hotel inspired stories. I don't have the capacity to write a whole collection inspired of stories inspired by the songs, and I wouldn't want it to be that. What you have this sort of vision of like, it's going to be a lot of different authors, a lot of folks whose work I really admire, and then a lot of people that I'm going to hopefully find through this process of reading and having an open call. And that's going to be something that I want to have in the world, and I'm going to be selfish and put the work in to make it real, to make it reality, to kind of change the world, to change my world at least, and have this be something that exists.
Yeah, I remember description. Someone described a game designer years and years ago as he created games that he wished he could play. So anyone else on this question at all?
I'll say something just very briefly, which is, yeah,
Sure.
I do agree. For me, it's partly trying to create work that I want to read or that I would like to read. But the other thing I do is I tend, as I'm reading, I read a lot and really enjoy reading. But when I'm reading, I tend to think about ways in which a story could go that it didn't go on the page. And so a lot of my writing is kind of starts there, kind of
That's interesting.
responding to work that I've read and just seeing where else it could go. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Anyone else at all? Yeah, Corey.
I guess kind of going off what Brian was saying and what others have said is I think sometimes what I'm writing is stuff that I would have liked like a younger version of myself to have been able to read. A lot of what I read is like, or what a lot of what I write is in a way to like make sense of my emotions. I'm like a fairly emotional person, so like it helps me like digest it and then get it out of my body. And also I just like always have to be creating something. I just don't know why that is what it is, kind of like going with what Linz was saying, but
Yeah.
I have to be doing something, and that something is writing.
Anyone else? And then I'll ask what I think is my last question. Yes, John.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how much I'm struggling not to say hookers and blow, but and I apologize for that. But no, I think it's that when I'm not writing, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
You know, there were times when I just realized I'm just kind of out of sorts. You know, the beginning of Moby Dick when Ishmael is like, I kind of realize when I'm not feeling right, when I'm getting ready to fight with everybody, I've got to go to sea. I kind of feel the same way if I'm not working on a piece of writing, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Why that should be, I think Erin's explanation is medically speaking is probably as good a one as I could offer. So I would not seek to improve on that, but I also think it brings me joy, and I hope it brings other people joy too, and that's always a precious thing in short supply.
For
I mean,
those, go ahead, Pete. I'm sorry.
I'm
Go ahead.
paraphrasing, but when when I'm writing, when I'm not writing, I'm a complete and utter mess. And when I am writing, I am a complete and utter mess in a completely different fashion. And and this is we can testify about this. I can drag my wife up here, and she's like, "Yeah, he's not a nice person anytime." But
That's not true.
Patrick's conversation about how, and he danced around it a little bit, but like how where he put John's story and why, and the structure of the anthology makes me think that we need to have a conversation at some point with a bunch of editors about how they structure anthologies, about
I'm
how
writing
they
this
choose
down.
their
That's a
stories,
great idea.
how stories go, because I think it's real important that it can make and break an anthology if it's structured properly or wrongly.
Think we should invite Alan?
Yeah, we could.
Probably, yeah. Probably invite Alan. Yeah. So
Anyway,
yeah.
and Patrick and a few other people, but yes.
That was a really great idea, Pete. I just wrote that down. For anybody watching or listening who's listening to this podcast for the first time, and thinks, "Wow, he hates John Langan." I don't. John's a great guy.
It's a lie. It's a lie.
I want to.
He hates me.
I want to say,
but he has dirt on me, so I have to come on and do these things.
That's true. If you've not read John's novel, The Fisherman,
then you're better off. You're better off. Trust me on this one.
And I keep saying, it just seems to me that it was published several years ago at the minimum. Can't remember when, but I keep saying
it was published when Trump first got into office, and those two things are not coincidental, my friends. It's all the bad things that have happened. It's all been downhill since then. Yeah.
It's been a while, but lately it keeps getting mentioned over and over. I keep saying to John, it's having another moment.
I think people are just getting ready for me to die, and they're just like, yeah, we want to make sure we say the night. I have never written a story with a title like Turducken. That is,
right.
I mean, I do not have that level of inspiration and creativity. The Fisherman, okay, Turducken, come on.
Well, when I was editing an anthology called Autumn Cthulhu, as no one here will be surprised to learn that I was still waiting on John's for a while, and I had to email.
I think the book went to press actually.
Not that bad. I emailed Laird, and Laird said I'll kick him in the ass. But it turned into a novella, and John said something in the email like, this is too long. You probably don't want this. And I read it. If you've not read it, and I think it's in one of your collections now, isn't it?
It's in my most recent collection. You were right. You were like, yeah, I don't want it. I don't, but I'm stuck because a bunch of other better writers have pulled out, and you know. So I was
Well,
like, okay.
the title is Anchor, and it's one of my it's on my one of my two favorite novellas. So
There's
either
another one? You son of a bitch.
yeah,
I can't
and I
even.
won't tell either of you which one is on top. So,
Mother.
but
That's
yeah,
the unkindest cut of all.
you can read it in Autumn Cthulhu. There's a lot of other small stories there. Or I'm sorry, which collection was it again?
It's the most recent one, Corpse Mouth and other
Mouth, right.
autobiographies.
Yeah.
And we're still doing something for Autumn Cthulhu too, whenever that happens.
Yeah,
So
you keep giving me shit about that, but I'll get to it. I'll get to it.
I've written 3 stories for that.
I'm surprised that Gwendolyn has not yelled at me because she gave me a story like 2 years ago for it, and I'm just so behind on everything. But
Gwendolyn Keist? You're
Yeah.
messing around with Gwendolyn Keist? Oh, you're a
I
dead
know.
man.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's
Last question I have, and then I'll let everyone get on with their evening. John knows what I'm going to say here. I did a Patreon podcast with John and Kristen Dearborn and Emma J. Gibbon. And as you know, John, I always ask, what does success mean to you as a writer?
Oh, I thought it was the why does no one like me question. But okay, that's
Yeah.
that one too. Yeah.
That one too.
I can hit.
Yeah. I'd like to ask anyone, don't feel compelled to answer, but for anyone here who would like to answer, what makes you feel successful as an author, as a writer? What has to happen in order for that to happen? Yes, Patrick.
I'll go. Yeah.
And then
I mean,
Christy. Okay.
I feel like it is a moving target, but chasing that target is not something where I feel like at a loss. Like I'm not gaining anything, and I'm constantly just seeking and never finding. I think you find those moments of success, a book publication, a signing where you get more than 2 people. It could vary. The level of what success is depends on the day. It depends on the moment in your writing career. And so I've had the series of ups and downs, successes, failures, rejections, acceptances, and all that kind of thing. And for me, success, I guess, is just being able to each day get up and be willing to try to keep creating. And I think once, if that ever happened where I woke up and I was like, I don't want to create, I don't want to make anything, then I might say like, oh, that's a real bummer. But that day hasn't happened yet. So I am optimistic for now.
Just real quick, John had a great answer to this question. In my Patreon only edition of this podcast, I do a series called Deep Background, and the 3 of us, me and Emma and Kristen, interviewed John and asked him all kinds of questions that we wanted to ask him, and asked him this one too, and I really loved his answer. If you're not a patron, it's only $5 a month, and there's a hell of a lot of extra content that you get for that. So you can find that in the show notes, or just Google it, Lovecraft Easing Patreon. But Christy and Aaron, I know, both wanted to answer this question about success. Please, Christy.
Oh, I wanted to make sure and answer because I didn't answer the other one and everybody else did. But my answer to the other one was exactly what Aaron said. But for this one,
I'm sorry, did I skip you? I'm so sorry.
Oh no, I didn't think everybody was going to answer. Then everybody was
okay,
did,
all right.
and I felt embarrassed.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, success for me is just finishing things, because for so many years I would start things or think about things or whatever and not finish them. And once I started finishing them, I felt like a superhero. So that's it.
That's a cool answer. I like that. Aaron.
I think success for me when I'm writing is when I can create something that feels very authentic and other people understand it. Even if they don't necessarily agree, but they get it. Because especially, when you talk about anthologies and books and works like this that are a little strange, they're weird. But if people people are completely vibing with it, I feel like that's a really great sign that you're hitting some universal truth in a brand new way, and that's a really special thing. So I think that for me is success. If I write just weirdness and someone's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense, then
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Dave.
Yeah, I guess in somewhat of the vein of what Christy said, and also related to the question of why you write, sometimes I feel like when I'm writing a story, it's because, or when I start writing a story, it's because there's like some scene or image or phrase or line or something that's in my mind, and I can't get it out, and just kind of stays in there. And I feel like for me, when I feel like I've really like successfully accomplished something, is when I don't have to think about that thing anymore, and it kind of it's out it's out of my head and out into the world. And I feel like for me, that's kind of the measure of success, is if I'm not thinking about the story anymore, then it's done, and I had some kind of success with it.
The interesting thing that you'll note so far is that no one's mentioned anything like when I make a lot of money, which, and I'm not saying that facetiously, you know. So yeah. The other
Wait, you
thing,
can make money?
yeah,
Oh,
I've heard, I've heard. Yeah, the other thing I've learned in this podcast, which I usually never have to use, or no one usually has to use, is the Zoom raise your hand feature. Uh, Aaron started that, I think, at the beginning of the podcast, and I was like, wow, you can do that? That's cool. So so anyway, Corey raised his hand. So
Yeah. So I don't know if I have like an overall idea of like an end game success, like what is the final stage and I'll feel successful or something like that.
right.
But like the two things that have made me feel successful at different times during my writing career is when like random people who don't know me or like my family or my friends are like, "Hey, I read your book and that was great." And I have no connection to you and there's no way like my mom like slipped it into your mailbox or something. Um, so that's one. And the other is when writers that I admire like say something nice about my stuff. Like when my first book came out, Living in Cemeteries, I reached out to Nathan Ballingrid about doing a blurb because like I love what Nathan does, and
Yeah.
he he didn't get to it. But on the day that it came out, he sent me a really nice email being like, "Hey, I wasn't able to get this in time, but like I really loved it." And then he wrote this like beautiful thing about it on Twitter, and I like kind of died, and I was like, "Wow, I feel like I'm doing okay." And also, Brian has said very nice things about my stuff also. Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and by the way, if you've not gotten to speaking to the audience, if you've not gotten to read Nathan Ballingwood's Crypt of the Moon Spider yet, he's got other books, but that's one of his latest. That's just such an amazing novella, and it's kind of a mashup in my mind, anyway, because I grew up reading a lot of Ray Bradbury. A bit of a mashup between Ray Bradbury and, say, Lovecraftian themes. That's one of the things I got out of it. So it's a really great story. So, Linz.
So I think I'm gonna echo like a lot of what other people have said here, and that like, I mean, I didn't get into this for the fame or the fortune. Be nice if those things happened, but I'm not fooling myself that this is an industry where that happens. But at the same time, it would be nice to make a somewhat living wage. And you know, whenever if I ever make a little money, that's always like a nice feeling. Um, but I think the ability to do something well, it is like Terry Pratchett says this via, I think, Esme Weatherwax, is like the price of being able to do something well is that you're able to do it well. And you should, and that's the satisfaction that you get from that. It's not payment or something else. And I think intrinsically that's kind of what feeds me when I finish a story and I know it's good and I show it to my fiance and she's like, I hate you. I wish I'd written this. I feel great. Or I send it to my friends and they're like, we're no longer friends. You made me cry again. You told me this wouldn't happen. Like those are the good feelings. But also to echo what Corey said as well, it's nice to have like respect from your peers as well as people that in the industry that you really value. Like Turducken was blurbed by Jeff Ford. I will always hold that in my heart as being like the pin. I actually think I peaked already. Maybe that was it. So I've already been here, but like that meant so much to me because Jeff is really cool, and I know him a little bit, and I've been privileged enough to work with him a little bit, and I've heard him read, and he's just like the master of the weird and the funny and the gut punch all at the same time. And like if I can be even 100 something that pleases Jeff Ford, I'm probably doing pretty well. So yeah, I guess a mismatch of those things.
Plus, he's such a gentleman. He's a hell of a nice guy.
He's such a nice guy.
Yeah.
He's so
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
one of my Patreons too. So if
Oh, is he? Okay.
yeah, if
Once
so, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be a used car salesman or say, Lens, you need to sign up. I'm just speaking to the audience. You know, if you want to be as cool as Jeff Ford, so
And we all do. We all do want to be.
yes, we do. Brian, yeah, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just figured out how to raise my hand, and now I have to figure out how to lower my hand, but I'm sure I'll manage.
I think I just got it, or you did.
Yeah, good job. So you know, I think for years I used to think about success as something that I would arrive at. It was like, you know, here it is, and it's going to be at the end of the path, and once I'm there, I'll be there and be able to relax or something. And you know, as time's gone on, I think about it less and less that way. I mean, I don't feel like success is really something you reach. It's just it's kind of just it's a long process, and I don't think, you know, to be honest, I feel like I'm always thinking, you know, I'm realizing kind of after the fact that people think I'm successful rather than feeling like, oh, I'm successful, things are going on. But it's like it's kind of always like belated or too late, or you know, you kind of by the time you feel like people, you know, are admiring you, I feel like you've already moved on to something else. And in that sense, I mean, I just feel like it's I don't know. I mean, I feel like for me, it's more a question of something that motivates you to go on to the next thing as much as anything else.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to field this one before we go? It's interesting to me the different answers to this question and the ways that these answers are similar as well. You know, it's one of the reasons why I love to ask this question, because I get so many different and interesting answers. For me, it's always been, if I can work for myself, something I love doing, and not get rich, but just help my wife pay the bills with it, then I feel pretty good about myself. I feel successful. There are other factors too. You know, you want to be successful as a dad, as a husband, and as a friend, and so forth. But as far as that goes, that's how I feel. Um, Anyone else want to say anything before we say goodbye to everyone? Something that I maybe should have asked, but I didn't. The name of the book, by the way, is And One Day We Will Die: Strange Stories Inspired by the Music of Neutral Milk Hotel. It's available in print and Kindle, edited by Patrick Barb. So you should be able to find it quite easily. So anyone, prize, Matt? Yeah, prize.
Okay, just a reminder that you could win a copy of the H.P. Lovecraft Cat Book. Just send an email to easyandprizes@gmail.com and put cat in the subject line. We will draw a winner in about 8 weeks. You got plenty of time to enter if you're listening to this later.
Yeah, and speaking of prizes, my upper tiers, the $25 a month and up tiers, I'm doing a drawing right now, and I'll randomly pick someone in a couple days. Got the Call of Cthulhu at the Mountains of Madness and the Dunwich Horror, illustrated by art by Francois Berenger, if I have his name exactly right, and it's illustrated through all of these too. These are really, really beautiful books.
He's a brilliant painter.
Yes.
He's from France.
Yeah. And John has something to say too, but I'll forget this if I don't say it right now. tomorrow night, Monday night, Alan, my friend and co-panelist Alan Hughes, and my son Logan and I were starting a kind of a horror gaming playlist on this channel. So we're going to live stream those, and we're going to start with a game called No One Lives Under the Lighthouse, which is not a jump scare game. It's more about this, the kind of fiction I love to read, the atmospheric, moody game. So that said, yes, John, please.
Actually, it was mostly just I'm like, wait, I can figure out how to do the hand thing too. No,
well, tell me how to do it then. I need to figure it out.
Go to reactions. It's under reactions.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, that's where it has a raise hand thing.
Cool.
Now everybody raises their hand. No, look,
if I were a professional, I would know that, so.
You kind of answered your own. I
yes,
yeah.
I did. So
anyway. Anyway, just know, in all seriousness, I'm really grateful to Patrick for doing this and for inviting me to be part of it. And I'm really grateful to be part of this with everybody else. These are, I don't know, it's nice to have an editor just do something weird, and trust a bunch of people to do something weird together, and just trust that that's going to result in something really remarkable. And yeah, I just it's whatever.
Oh shucks.
Well, it's what we were saying about the Neutral Milk Hotel stuff, right? It's like trying to get beyond, trying to be enthusiastic about something, and I'm appreciative for that. And I know there were some curveballs in terms of publication stuff and that, but I thought you just kind of rolled with it. You were always really responsive, at least for, I felt to us, and asking us what are we comfortable with and what do we want to do. And it was really a great experience. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, having been on the other side, I felt like I could, try to communication for editors, always publishers, is something we don't always get in the small press and other types of publishing. So my goal was just to keep everybody in the loop and kind of a part of the process. And the end result, I got to work with some people whose writing I really admire. I got to work with some people who were like contemporaries, I feel like, and whose work I also admire. And I got to find new writers. There's a few people who I'd never seen published anywhere else. They sent stories in, they nailed the vibe, they nailed the mood. And it's one of those things where you get to read somebody new and say, this is awesome. I hope everyone buys more stories from these authors. I don't know when I'm going to do an anthology again, but I was like, I'm glad that they're here and a part of this this assemblage of creative people.
Yeah, and to that point, for those who are watching who, obviously haven't read the book yet, these writers here are the ones who could make it today. This is probably what, 1/3 of the writers in the anthology. Is that about right?
You're asking me to do math? That's not gonna it's not gonna happen. But yeah, we got 22 stories total,
right, okay.
22 authors.
Yeah. So anyway, what John and Patrick just said, that's a beautiful way to sum all of this up. Just remember the title, And One Day We Will Die, stories inspired by Neutral Milk Hotel. To all of you, I really appreciate you guys being here today, and I hope I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. So are you shaking your head, John?
Not consciously, but I mean, who knows?
All right. Well, thanks everybody, and appreciate everybody watching and listening, and especially I appreciate my patrons, and we will see you guys
Recording
next time.
stopped.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.